If you've been watching my channel for a while now, you might remember my series where I ranked the top crypto sectors out there. But in that series, I missed one sector in particular that I totally slept on, and that'd be DePIN. If you don't know, DePIN stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. And let me tell you, that sector is super hot right now. Basically, DePIN uses blockchain and crypto to create more efficient and transparent versions of real-world infrastructure. I'm talking about things like wireless networks, energy grids, data storage systems, and more. But is the hype surrounding this sector real? Or is it just a bunch of overpromised and under-delivered fluff? Well, in this video, we're gonna answer those questions by diving deep into the world of DePIN. We'll look at some pros and cons, and then we'll rank it versus all the other crypto sectors out there. So let's start with the strongest pros that I could find. First of all, I love how DePIN projects are not just for the crypto degens. They're creating real-world solutions that provide value to the average Joe. Take Helium Mobile, for example. They're creating a people-powered mobile network that can provide 5G speeds at low prices. And guess what? It's working. Their early momentum shows that there's a legit path to millions of users from outside the crypto space. In fact, they're currently onboarding users at an annualized rate of 250,000 per year. Now, how are they able to do this? Well, they have a mobile token, which is used as incentives for people to set up hotspots, as well as sign up for their cellular plans. Back in December of 2023, users were earning around $6 per day on a $20 monthly plan. That means they were actually making money just by using their phone as usual. So that was a no-brainer, and you could see why they were able to grow so quickly. But really, the broader point here is that DePIN is not just about hype and speculation. It's about generating real revenue that's driven by utility. You see, across 6 core business models, DePIN is pulling in over $15 million in annualized on-chain revenue. Now, that may not seem like a big number, but if you think about it, it's actually super impressive, given that this is on-chain revenue, not them doing some Web 2 stuff and then collecting money on the side. And get this, during the last market cycle, when everything else was tanking, DePIN revenues proved to be one of the most resilient compared to the other sectors. That's because DePIN is based on real-world use cases, and as an investor, you can judge these projects based on clear metrics such as adoption, pricing, and service quality, not just on how much hype they have. Like, take Render Network as an example. They're one of the biggest DePIN projects by market cap, and they provide distributed GPU rendering services for all sorts of use cases. And then there's Livepeer, a decentralized video streaming network that's taking on the likes of YouTube and Twitch. These are just a few of the projects that are generating revenue by solving real-world problems, rather than putting out marketing fluff in order to pump their token. Now, here's where things get really interesting, because I think DeFi could become a key part of the AI revolution. You see, as AI applications become more complex, they're gonna need an insane amount of computing power to keep up. Currently, all the tech giants are rushing to buy NVIDIA GPUs, and they're buying so much that there's a huge backlog and supply is running short. This is great for NVIDIA, of course, but for all the smaller companies or teams that don't have the budget to buy these GPUs, well, they still need to train their models and power their apps somehow, right? Well, this is where DePIN could potentially help. You see, one subsector within DePIN is decentralized compute marketplaces. This is basically where people provide their unused GPU power for others to rent. So individually, it's just a bunch of GPUs owned by random people like you and I, but connected together, it forms a formidable worldwide network that could be the solution to this compute bottleneck. And get this, it's not only the fact that these DePIN solutions unlock additional supply, but it's also way cheaper, like 4 times cheaper than the centralized alternatives that also offer rentable compute. So that's a game changer for AI startups and university teams, as they definitely don't have a huge budget to work with. And this is why I think there's real synergy between these two sectors, as DePIN provides the infrastructure, AI brings the brains, and crypto ties it all together with economic incentives and security. Anyhow, my next big pro for DePIN is the fact that smart money and big players are drooling over the sector. So far, the top DePIN projects have raked in over $1 billion in funding from heavy hitters such as Fenbushi Capital, NGC Ventures, and multi-coin capital. But you know what's an even bigger deal in my mind? It's the fact that Asia is leading the charge in DePIN development. Major funds and accelerators are popping up to support the DePIN space in Asia. For example, Future Money Group just launched a $5 million DePIN accelerator program with IoTex. And a bunch of top research firms are predicting that multiple top DePIN projects will come out of Asia within the next 2 years. The thesis is that the strong manufacturing capacity of the greater Chinese Bay Area, combined with the strong policy support for Web3 in Hong Kong, will accelerate the development of DePIN over there. Either way, it's clear that the big brains see something special in the sector, and that's why they're putting their money where their mouth is. Now, something that I've said so many times in the past is that narrative is king when it comes to crypto. Whether we like it or not, it's a fact that in our current environment, narratives matter more than other fundamentals. But you see, this is where DePIN excels, as its narrative is gaining serious traction and it's establishing itself as one of the leading trends in the space. Just look at the numbers. The DePIN sector has grown from 1 to 5% of the total crypto market cap over the past 2 years. And that's just the beginning. Projections show that the DePIN sector could reach an insane $3.5 trillion in value by 2028. That's a 150x increase from its current market cap of around 20 billion. Yep, you heard me right, 150x. We're seeing this narrative play out in real time, by the way, with new DePIN projects launching left and right. And recently, this sector has doubled in value since January. Some of the top projects driving this growth are Nodal, which has around 780,000 devices, and Grass, which has onboarded around 2 million users already. So that's just the beginning, and either way, it'll be super exciting to follow along. Now, all this is to say that despite these impressive pros, the DePIN sector is still largely flying under the radar. Right now, DePIN is considered a niche category with a relatively small combined market cap. When I looked at CoinGecko, I was shocked to see that DePIN ranks 32nd when sorted by category market cap. But you know what that means? Opportunity. As the market sentiment shifts and awareness grows, we could see DePIN projects explode in value. After all, just look at what happened to Filecoin in 2021. It 10x'd in a single quarter. Or Helium, that did 100x in a year as the project gained traction and mainstream attention. So the point is that this is still a relatively new sector. So if you decide you want to invest or participate in some of these projects, then you're still quite early, all things considered. Phew, that was a lot of pros, wasn't it? So I bet you're feeling super bullish on the sector. But before you go ape into anything, you gotta hear out my cons, as I always strive to be fair with my analysis. And my first con would be the fact that this sector is lacking in terms of mainstream awareness. I mean, just try bringing up Filecoin or Helium at your next family dinner and see how many blank stares you get. Outside of crypto, recognition of DePIN is pretty much non-existent, and I think it's partly due to the complexity of it. Just look at a project like Filecoin as an example. You have to deal with concepts such as proof of replication, proof of space-time, and collateral mechanisms. Those are way too confusing and way too complex. That's why if DePIN projects want to reach their full potential, then they have to focus on education and outreach to help bridge the gap between the degens and the average Joes. That means more user-friendly interfaces, more compelling use cases, and just more education to the masses. Otherwise, DePIN might just stall at its currently limited market share, which would be quite the shame. Anyhow, that's not the only issue I see, as another big one is the high barrier to entry for projects in the space. Let's face it, building DePIN infrastructure is not cheap. Just take a look at ICP, which fancies itself as a DePIN network. Well, if you want to participate in that, then you'd have to buy a node, which costs around $25,000. That's honestly a big ask for individual operators or small businesses looking to participate. And on top of that, you'd have to pay additional hardware expenses with no good way of estimating your ROI. For example, you could buy a Helium hotspot device that costs between $249 to $499, but there's no guarantee of how much HNT you'll earn over the lifespan of that device. That's why many of these DePIN projects that have high participation costs could hit a major roadblock, which would prevent them from getting off the ground or scaling efficiently. One byproduct of these high costs is that DePIN projects can't as easily tap into developing countries where access to capital and hardware is more scarce. but those are precisely the markets that could benefit the most from these DePIN services. So yeah, that's just a huge shame. Now, there's another big problem when it comes to these DePIN devices, and that is supply chain risks. You see, many DePIN projects design and manufacture their own proprietary hardware for the devices that make up their network. The issue with that is that they're essentially putting all their eggs into one basket. If something goes wrong with the manufacturing or distribution process, the whole network could come tumbling down. And this isn't just some hypothetical, by the way. It actually happened with PlanetWatch, an air quality monitoring network that had to completely pivot their strategy when their sensor supplier stopped working with them. So these single points of failure can be a death sentence for DePIN projects, especially when they're in their early stages. Now, some projects are trying to mitigate these risks by embracing open source designs or partnering with different manufacturers. But the fact remains that relying too heavily on centralized hardware production is a risky bet that threatens this otherwise decentralized world of DePIN. Now, let's just say that a DePIN project doesn't face any of those problems that I just mentioned. Well, there's still one problem that they cannot escape, and that's the fact that they have to compete with the centralized giants out there. Just look at the cloud computing market, for example, that has Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. Those guys have unlimited funds and extensive infrastructure, making it really hard for DePIN projects to compete with them. And then there are other companies such as Cloudflare that are developing their own DePIN-like solutions that also makes them somewhat of a competitor. Finally, let's not forget that these large corporations could just straight up acquire DePIN projects or develop their own pseudo-decentralized solutions in-house. So to really compete, DePIN networks will need to go beyond just decentralization. They'll need to offer better performance, lower costs, and unique features that these centralized giants can't provide. It's going to be insanely difficult, which is why it's possible that DePIN will only ever be a niche sector that certain customers work with, but they'll never be able to make a dent in the broader market that's currently dominated by the centralized giants. Anyhow, that was a lot of pros and cons to digest, wasn't it? But now it's time for the fun part, ranking this sector against all others. So here's my latest updated rankings with DePIN added. As you can see, it's quite high, and rightfully so because there's a lot of potential in this sector. But as you saw with the cons, there's also a lot of hurdles that they have to overcome in order to reach their full potential. That being said, if you really like DePIN and are thinking about participating in some of these projects in order to earn crypto, then guess what? You're in luck because I made another video all about passive income strategies in crypto. Give it a watch if you're interested.